Hello children, we are discussing the chapter 1 of your syllabus, The Living World. In our previous lecture, we had studied what is life. I explained you what is life, bacho. Life is a complex organization of ions and molecules that will perform certain chemical reaction which leads to growth, development, reproduction, self-replication, etc. Next, we are discussing the chapter that what is living. For that, we must have to go through certain characteristics, because to study whether an organism is living, we have to compare the living organism with the non-living things. So for that comparison, we will go with certain characteristics, and those characteristics will define that whether an organism is living or not. तो बच्चों ये बात जानने के लिए कि कोई चीज लिविंग है या नहीं, हम कुछ certain characteristics के थ्रू जाते हैं. I explained you those characteristics. Those characteristics were cellular structure, metabolism, reproduction, growth, self-replication, death, evolution, adaptation. All these characteristics we had studied. In today's revision, I'll just go through with the main characteristics. For example, the first one is growth. Growth is shown by the living things as well as by the non-living things. But what is the difference? The growth of living organisms is internally as well as externally, whereas the growth of non-living things occurs only by their external means. So, growth occurs in both the living and the non-living things. That means it is not a defining property of a living organism, or defining property to distinguish a living from non-living. So, it is not a defining property. Now, the question arises, what is a defining property? Defining property, is a feature, is a characteristic which is shown by all the individuals, all the living organisms. Whereas defining characteristics or defining feature is a sort of character which is shown differently by the living organisms. We will discuss this later. So basically the growth is not a defining property. Second property which we discussed today is reproduction. Reproduction means the production of new organisms from the pre-existing ones. Reproduction is a major characteristic of living organisms. Non-living things generally do not reproduce, but still there's one or two exceptions are there. What are these exceptions? Sterile organisms, sterile offsprings are the exceptions to those. Hinny or mules, these are the certain animals which produced by fertile organisms, but they themselves are sterile. जो हिनी है बच्चे और जो म्यूल्स है वो खुद बच्चे पैदा नहीं कर सकते. They are sterile offsprings. So they produce by reproduction, but further on they cannot give rise to a new organism. That means reproduction is also not a defining property of a living organism, as certain living organisms also cannot produce young ones. In human beings also, the human beings which are affected by certain disorders may leads to sterility. They cannot be able to reproduce further. That means those living organisms are not considered as living? No, that's not the case. They are considered as living, but due to certain disorders they cannot be able to reproduce. So reproduction is a main characteristic of living organism, but still it is not a defining property between the living and non-living organisms. Next, stimulus, or you can say response to environment. We have discussed, bache, living things usually gives a response to any environmental change. When we touch a hot plate, we pull back our hand. When we accidentally put our feet, or we accidentally pull over our feet over a spine, then immediately we back it up. These are certain responses which are shown by the living organisms. Plants also show various movements like hydrotropic movements, geotropic movements. You have discussed those movements in your class 10th So those are the movements, those are the responses of plant parts in response to a stimuli. So stimulus is a characteristic, consciousness is a characteristic which is a defining feature, which is a defining character of living organism. Stimulus or response to a stimulus does not shown by non-living things. So consciousness is a basic defining property of living organism which is absent in non-living organisms. Fourth one, metabolism. Metabolism or metabolic activities are the activities which occurs in living organism. The sum total of all the activities occurring in the living systems is known as metabolism. So metabolism does not occur in non-living organisms, although we can perform metabolic reactions in laboratories, but still metabolic reactions are the reactions which only occur in living organisms. So these are the defining property of living organism. Next, fifth one is death. Every living organism must die. No living organism is immortal. Whereas non-living things do not die. They remain on the earth if remain untouched for billion, trillion years of time period. So death is essential for living organism. Every living organism must die. So these are certain properties on which we decide whether a organism is living or non-living. Next, sixth, cellular structure. You can write the cellular organization as well, bache. Living organisms are composed of cells, whereas non-living organisms do not have cells. Although both the organisms, whether living or non-living, are made up of atoms and molecules, ions, but living organisms have cells, whereas non-living organisms do not possess cells. But cellular structure is not a defining property, it is a defining feature. Why? Because bache, all the living organisms do not possess same type of cells. So that is why it is not a defining property. It is a defining feature between the living and non-living things. So now, after this, now we will move on to our next topic, that is the identification, classification and nomenclature of the living organisms. The next topic of discussion is systematics. Systematics is made from a Greek word that is systema, that means order, a particular sequence. Systematics is a branch that deals with the principles and laws of identification, nomenclature and classification of organisms. That branch is referred as systematics. Systematics बच्चे एक ऐसी ब्रांच है which gives a systematic arrangement, as its name indicates बच्चे systematic arrangement of identification or recognition, पहचानना बच्चे, classification उनको groups में divide करना on the basis of similarities and dissimilarities, and the most important one, the nomenclature of the organisms is done in this branch. Systematics is a combination of taxonomy and evolutionary relationships. सिस्टमैटिक्स जो है बच्चे वो रिलेशनशिप है किसके बीच में, टैक्सोनॉमी और इवोल्यूशनरी रिलेशनशिप्स में. Evolutionary relationship means the relationship between the other species of a particular species. एक पर्टिकुलर प्रजाति का दूसरी प्रजातियों के साथ जो रिलेशनशिप है, that is known as evolutionary relationship. That how we evolved from ancestors, to which species we are more common in the form of ancestry. Next is taxonomy, the same thing. That is the branch of science that deals with the classification, nomenclature and identification of individuals or new species is known as a taxonomy. Now Ajay will discuss about the nomenclature. And that nomenclature is referred as a binomial nomenclature. Every animal or plant have given a certain local name. Local name has certain advantages, common name has certain advantages. What are these advantages? They are easy to remember. Next, they are according to their tribal regions. The common names are according to the sufficiency of the plants and animals. more sufficient, more useful an organism is, more commonly they are named as a common name, or more commonly they are provided with that common name. But bachon, those common names have certain disadvantages as well. What are these disadvantages? Those common names may be ambiguous. What do you mean by ambiguity? That one organism can be referred with the similar names. Next, more than one names can be assigned, more than one common names can be assigned to a single organism. For example, the house sparrow, the normal sparrow, has 8 to 10 names in India only, in different languages. Next thing, bache, the common names are not same in every region. So it may create a confusion to the researchers or to the persons, to the scholars who are studying those organisms, those plants, those animals, and they may be confused regarding their characteristics. So to remove all those confusions, we have gone to a scientific system of nomenclature, and that is known as binomial nomenclature system. Binomial nomenclature system means a name must be given. By means 2 words. Out of 2 words, the first one is referred as generic name, or you can say the name of the genus, and the second word is specific epithet, or you can say it is related to the particular species. So that is the binomial nomenclature, in which an organism is given a 2-word name which is remain same for an organism everywhere in the world. Binomial nomenclature was first discussed in Systema Naturae, a book written by Carolus Linnaeus. In this book, he gave certain rules for that, and then later on we modified certain rules. कुछ rules उसमें थे बच्चे, कुछ को हमने modified कर दिया. The first rule is every scientific name is composed of 2 words, out of which the first is genus and the other is specific epithet, which represents the name of the species. Next, when we print the name must be in italics. That means when we print a name, a scientific name, a binomial nomenclature name, then that name must be printed in italics font. And when we represent it as a handwritten name, then that name must be underlined. For example, Panthera tigris. It is a scientific name, it is a proper name, binomial nomenclature followed up name of tiger. Panthera here represents the genus and tigris means the species. Another name you can take as example, that is Panthera leo. Panthera is the genus and Panthera is the genus for the big cats, and Leo means lion. So it's the scientific name for lion and it's the scientific name of tiger. So both of these are handwritten, so they must be underlined. Otherwise, if they are printed, they must be printed in italics font. Next, the name of genus must be written with the capital alphabet, and name of the species always written with the small alphabet. So as you can see, the name of the genus is written as capital and the name of the species is written as small alphabet. So these are certain rules. Next rule. Name of the scientist or the discoverer can be written after the name of the organism, after the name of the species. For example, Homo sapiens. It is the scientific name of human beings. So the name of the scientist who gave this name is Linnaeus. So lineage can be abbreviated as LINN dot. Next, for these names there are certain codes like ICBN, International Code of Botanical Nomenclature, ICZN, International Code of Zoological Nomenclature, ICBACN, that is International Code of Bacteriological Nomenclature. So these various codes will define the rules. So according to these rules, we gave a name to a particular organism. Next rule is, you can write a third word, that is the name of subspecies, along with the main name, that is Homo sapiens. Sapiens. So sapiens is the name of subspecies, that is the name of sub-variety of Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens is a scientific name of human beings. So this word, this name includes 3 words now. So this type of nomenclature is referred as trinomial nomenclature. This scientific names has certain advantages. इन साइंटिफिक नेम्स की, इन बायनोमियल नोमेनक्लेचर फॉलोड अप नेम्स की कुछ एडवांटेजेस हैं, कुछ फायदे हैं. फर्स्ट वन, those names are named, those names are placed, those names are to be nominated on the basis of scientific manner, in the basis of scientific logic. So basically these names are scientifically proven. Next, these names are descriptive names. These names give certain description about the name of the organism. Next thing, the spellings of the name cannot be changed. If the names are to be placed once, they cannot be able to change into new spellings or into new names. Next, specificity. Every living organism, whosoever provided a binomial nomenclature followed up name, is fixed. That name cannot be changed further. Next, these names are taken from a Latin language. So this language is a dead language, nobody uses it. So now there is no chance of separation, no chance of barring or no chance of change of that name, that spelling, whatsoever we placed it. So these are certain advantages of binomial nomenclature names. Along with that, these names can be related to the organisms of the same genus. Example I gave you about the Panthera, like Phallus, like Mangifera. These are certain genus in which various species lies. Next, a wrong name can easily be corrected by this method. So these are certain advantages of binomial nomenclature. Next we discuss about the classification. As its name indicates, classes means groups. As in our school, various children, according to their age group, according to their classes, are divided into various sections, various classes. For example, this is a fixed age group related to a particular class. For like pre-primary, there are 3 years of age group, 3.5. For first, it will be 4 and 5 years. For second, it will be 5 and 6 years, and so on. Likewise, the organisms are classified on the basis of their similarities and dissimilarities in their properties. Those properties we will discuss in the followed up chapters, but you have discussed those properties, those characters in the class 9. For example, the mode of nutrition. On this basis, the organisms are differentiated. Cellular composition, whether the cellular composition is prokaryotic or eukaryotic. Cellular organization, whether an organism is multicellular or unicellular. Presence or absence of cell wall. These are the characteristics on which we classify the organisms. So these classification levels are referred as taxon. The levels in which we classify the organisms are known as taxon. Taxons are the levels, are the ranks in which the organisms are arranged, in which the organisms are classified. Those are referred as taxons. So next we study the taxonomic categories or taxonomical hierarchy. The ranks in which the organisms are grouped on the basis of their similarities and dissimilarities. Majorly, we study the organisms in main 7 categories, and those 7 categories are referred as kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. Species is a singular as well as plural in itself. These categories are majorly known as obligate categories. These are major categories. Then we have further intermediate categories as well, like phylums or divisions are referred as subphylums or subdivisions. Class has superclass and subclass. Order has superorder and suborders. Subfamily, superfamilies. These are certain intermediate classification ranks, taxons. So these are the categories in which we classify an organism, in which we group an organism. To study those, you can go either from downwards to upwards or upwards to downwards. That is based on the similarities and dissimilarities. Species have more related characters. It has the smallest number of organisms. The number of organisms is smallest along these taxa, but the individuals are almost alike. Not almost alike, are alike, beta. The species contains all the organisms which have same basic characterized designs and all are same. As we move up, the relations starts decreased. Related characters are minimum, but number of organisms keeps on increasing. So kingdom has maximum number of organisms, whereas species have least different type of organism but least number of organism, but those organisms which are included in species have the most common characteristics.